You're listening to the Limitless Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed to help automotive repair shops learn how to lead, coach, train, and manage their team better by sharing proven techniques and thought-provoking interviews from industry leaders. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's today's episode.
All right, everyone, jumping right into today's episode. Today, I am joined by an incredible guest. Our guest is a husband. He's a chief cheerleader. He's the proud father of a 5-pound Chihuahua. He's also the owner of 5 automotive shop locations, all called Neely Tire and Auto. Our guest today is the namesake of those shops, Mr. AJ Neely.
Yeah, Josh, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, brother.
Man, hey, thank you for being here, AJ. I'm excited to have you on the show. I learned about you through another podcast from a friend of ours, Chris Jones, on the Ratchet and Wrench podcast. And folks, when I say that I heard AJ just really drop nugget after nugget on leadership things on an automotive repair podcast, I'm thinking, hey, this is a leadership podcast. I need to have this guy on the Limitless Leadership Podcast. And so here we are. So, man, I'm really excited that you're here, and I'm excited for the audience to get to know who you are.
Yeah, thank you. Let's make this a jam-packed episode.
Let's do it. So let's get right into it then. So, AJ, let's go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. Share with us who you are, what you do, what got you here. Basically, give us AJ Neely's life story in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, life story, 2 minutes. Yeah, driven, relentless, grit. I think of all those things that kind of encapsulates really any business owner trying to grow something, right? There's anyone that's in that world just knows it's a grind, right? And, are you willing to get up every day and get kicked between the legs and get up the next day with that same enthusiasm, right? Day after day after day. But, I look back at like what got me into the industry and what kind of got me into business ownership. I look back when I was 5 years old with Legos, right? I think I had that knack. There's like a Dilbert episode that's out there about a kid that gets diagnosed with the knack. I just had a knack with working with my hands, putting things together. Once it kind of transitioned to getting my own set of wheels and working on my own vehicle, I was able to get a job right out of high school working as a technician at a independent Honda and Acura repair shop in Pasadena, Maryland. And that was the bug. It just, I love the industry. One of my strengths finders items is input, right? And I just love learning and just trying to understand how things work. And so I worked as a technician for about 10 years. I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to start my own company. And so I was very blessed and fortunate to buy a house with this like awesome 1-bay garage behind it. And of course, I didn't care about the house. I really cared about the garage. So I moved into this house, kind of did some side work there. And I got to a point where I had enough side business to kind of quit my day job. Parallel with me being a technician, I was also working on a racing career, believe it or not, that I was really, really just passionate about and working. I kind of got to a professional level with Volkswagen for a couple of years, but you can only be a driver for so long. And I just needed to make the investment, make the switch to what's gonna be around for the long haul for me. So made the transition, started my business in 2011, again, out of that 1-bay garage behind my house. So I knew everything about working on cars, but I knew nothing about running a business. And I didn't really take it seriously until about 2014. I found out about RLO training. I took a boot camp course, I guess you can say. They called it the Guerrilla Shop Management course. And I'll never forget it, man. Like they sent a binder that was like this. I kid you not. I still have this thing somewhere back here, but it was like a mind-blowing experience because I just learned about everything about how to build a business plan and, how to find a relationship with a banker, like it's soup to nuts, right? Just kind of building and growing a shop. So I just implemented stuff next day. We grew quite quickly. And we opened our first location here in Edgewater. I moved out of my 1-bay garage, made this huge giant leap of faith and a lot of divine intervention that allowed us to move into our first location here in Edgewater in 2016, a 9-bay garage. It was just like, wow. Oh my goodness. So all these are first, right? Dealing with environmental regulatory issues, underground storage tanks that were leaking, literally look like it's that scene out of The Money Pit, when Shelley Long's character gets dropped off and the taxi driver's like, hey, do they test bombs here? Because that's what it looked like. The whole shop was blowing up. We had to just destroy it, restart from scratch. And then in 2.5 months, we opened our doors, and that was like the start of like this journey, this leadership journey, right? Like once you have people working for you, like you are a leader, in some way or another. Believe it or not, you're in that role. Now, what level you're at, of course, will come and be defined. But anyway, let's fast forward to 2021. We kind of got into multi-store ownership, opened our second store, and then we went on a tear. We actually opened 4 stores in 18 months. It was quite a journey, and that's where we're at today. We're still at 5 locations, and we do want to grow, but we're kind of working through our next set of growing pains to kind of get us to the next level. So I know I went over my 2-minute limit, but that's us
Hey,
in a
man.
nutshell. So
AJ, well, first, thanks for sharing that. We have plenty of time. I mean, when you mentioned 4 stores in 18 months, immediately I'm thinking, oh man, I need to check on this guy's stress level. I mean, 4 stores in 18 months, but let's go back a little further. By the way, if you're listening, you can watch this entire episode on YouTube. When I mentioned stress level, AJ took off his hat and then he revealed he has no hair. So that gives you an indication of where, of how things are going. But I will tell you, all joking aside, AJ, you are really good at what you do. I mean, I don't know you that well. I mean, we're still getting to know each other, but the way that you value people, the way that you value and recognize the importance of leading people, I think that goes such a long way in the success of anyone's organization. Of course, this is a leadership podcast. You mentioned the importance of leadership and where your leadership journey began. I'm going to just straight up ask you, what does leadership mean to you?
yeah, great question. I'm a man of faith. I do a chapter a day in the Bible. There's no better precedent than Jesus Christ himself. And he says it, if you're going to lead, do it diligently. Right. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's serving your people, and that's ultimately it. It doesn't matter what your position or title, you could be the guy sweeping the floor. You could be, the chief CEO, like it's still to serve, and so leadership for me is ultimately serving the people that work for you, serving your community, serving your customers. It's just serve, and that servant mindset, I believe it's like the biggest attribute. And again, there's no better teacher than him himself. So that's how I define leadership.
Love it. So what I'm hearing you say is it really is servant leadership. I mean, servant leadership at the heart of it is what leadership is all about. And something that I really believe in is how there are 2 aspects to this, because as a servant leader, someone might hear the word servant and feel like, well, this is a submissive, vulnerable place that I don't want to be in. That means I don't have control over my team. And it's not about control. Servant leadership, and you can speak more on this too, AJ, but servant leadership, the servant aspect is the operational the operational side of things. The leadership aspect is the visionary side of things. As a servant leader for 5 locations, you obviously can't be in all locations at once. How are you leading your team by casting a clear vision, driving the mission towards that vision, all while serving each store and each team member within that store at the same time?
Right. Yeah. And, there's a lot too on this journey, speaking of like a leadership team, I kind of bulked up. I had a really massive leadership team. I had a head of sales, a head of operations, a marketing person, a controller, like the list goes on. I had this really fat team, and I just thought too, the way I grew my first store, I should just be able to sprinkle this fairy dust on every store as we grew, and it should just all happen and come into place. And then you quickly realize like, wow, like, when you can control one location and you have all of the people at that store as your direct report, it does become a lot easier. But once you get to this stage where you have like a middle management layer and you're really having to serve individuals that kind of have to be like you and instill those same behaviors and values to their team at their location, it becomes really difficult, And so, I would agree with that, in that when you talk about servant leadership, it might come as if you're just having to like bend the knee and just take whatever that, it comes at you and just kind of, be meek, but it's really meant to, you can also display it, and it comes across as tough love, right?
Yes.
And,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
having those difficult conversations with individuals too, to like, hey, I'm pouring my heart out, serving you because I love you, and quite honestly, if I didn't, I wouldn't be having this conversation
That's
with
right.
you.
I love
But,
that you said that.
yeah. And along that journey too, it's setting crystal clear expectations for the role. And these are the things, by the way, like you mentioned that like, oh, I'm like really great success. I am not at all. Like I can tell you all the things of what not to do. As Alex Hormozy says too, it's like paying off your ignorance debt. I've learned so much about what not to do. Don't buy these types of shops. Don't do this. Don't like, there's so many things you should not do, but there's no shortcuts to success. You just have to go through it. Right. And I think it's just the resiliency and the grit required to acknowledge your mistakes. Don't look at them as like, don't ever regret them. They have to happen. The failures are necessary to fail forward, to learn from them and grow in the correct direction. So anyway, all that being said, it's like, yeah, how do you get what is here, and we kind of call the tribal knowledge and the leadership style, and how do you develop your people to instill those same values? So back to your vision piece, we do run on EOS, so there's the visionary, there's the integrator, there's this and that and the other. I'm kind of in both those seats right now, but yeah, it's creating clarity around the vision and then casting that vision to everyone, right? And so that happens on a regular basis, right? We hire and fire off these core values. This is us, right? Impacting lives. That's our core purpose. And then executing on that vision, right? It's really where the integrator comes in. And so it's like putting it to the pavement and making it happen and getting that traction, kind of in your business, in your company. So you're always tweaking, you're always defining kind of like what the roles and responsibilities are. You're always you have to over communicate these things. And that's a big thing as you grow and scale. It's communication. Yes, the right people in the right seats, of course, and you kind of have to figure that out and define what the role looks like. Make sure they have those attributes. Make sure they align with your vision, align with your values, and that they're on mission. And if they do those things, then it's just a matter of over communicating to make sure that. I just had my leadership meeting this morning. It's about shrinking that knowledge gap, right? There's stuff that I know that they don't know, but I don't know what they don't know sometimes, right? And so it's just a matter of keeping that line of communication open all the time, over communicating, just really being their coach, because you are at that level. You have to look at it as a coaching mentality to coach them, grow them in the right direction.
That's right, man. You said so many nuggets just now that I want to kind of go back on, but even in regards to communication, I mean, when there's a breakdown in communication, we know that voids tend to get created, and oftentimes negativity fills those voids. So even when we're thinking that we're communicating and over communicating, we may not be communicating enough still. So always communicate. I think proactive communication is going to rule the day every day. You mentioned EOS, you mentioned Traction. There's a great book by Gino Wickman that you referenced. Traction is a fantastic book on EOS and the process-driven side of that. And also you mentioned, I think I've heard you reference the word learn or learning 3 times already in this podcast episode. AJ, you and I think would both agree that a great leader also requires being a great follower. And it's very evident to me that you have this growth mindset. You're someone who believes in being committed to lifelong learning. You mentioned Alex Hormozy. I know recently you attended one of his events in Vegas, and we talked about how important it is to always learn and always sharpen your axe and to invest in yourself. Can you speak to the importance of investing in not only yourself, but investing in your team, whether it be coaching or training or something along those lines?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before, and it's true. Even the presidents have a coach. Like you go up the chain of command of like whatever that is, and even the people all the way at the top, like they need mentors, they need coaches, they need people they can confide in. And so, yeah, I mean, for us to continue to grow, we have to continuously learn. That's also we stole this core value kind of from EOS because it's one of theirs, but it's grow or die. That's one of our core values. Like I liken growing yourself a lot like the dollar of inflation, right? If you put $1 in the bank account today, that dollar will be worth less money in 10, 20 years from now, right? So that's assuming you did nothing else, right? That dollar won't be as powerful as it is today. That's just how inflation works. So growing yourself is the same way. If you're not growing, you are dying. Like the knowledge that you know today will not translate and work in 10, 20, 50 years from now, right? You have to be continuously growing to just beat the rate of inflation. Like you've got to stay above that line. And so if you're not doing it, you don't have a culture of growth and training, and that includes myself, our people, of course, especially in the industry that we're in with technicians and the evolvement of technology. Like it's a must. It's required for us to be relevant.
Man, so I feel like there's a number of different titles this episode could be. Grow or die, diagnose the knack. The title is going to be, and it is, blind optimism, because you and I talked on our first initial introductory call, AJ. Something I heard in the interview that I listened to with you and Chris Jones was this concept that you shared about how, like, you didn't know what you didn't know. It's like you went into it and you may have not ever expected to be at 5 locations just 13 years later after opening your first. And who knows, maybe 13 more years later, you might triple that number. But what you're doing each and every day is you're putting forth the time, the effort, the energy, you're putting in the hard work. Discipline trumps motivation. And even on the days that you're not motivated, you do the necessary work in order to grow so that you don't die. Let's talk about blind optimism, what that means based on the context that you and I have discussed, and how you've been able to, quote unquote, make it 13 years after you're opening your first one.
Yeah, I ignorance is bliss. I'll just say that because, and I think it does. I think Steve Jobs talks about it too. There's some sort of quote that has to do with passion, right? Like passion is like anyone else outside of like what you're doing or is literally just going to think that you're crazy. Like why are you putting in these 20-hour days? Like what is this all for? Like you will on that path, like you are going to lose friends. People are going to question your sanity, like not understand what it is. But we know with that light inside of us, there's this inner drive, there's this tug, the Holy Spirit's working through us something, right? And it's just it's allowing us to really grow. And sometimes we'll look in the mirror like, why are we doing this? But I love it. Like I can't wait. Like I don't need that alarm clock to go off because I'm ready to get up and just take on the day, right? And so that blind optimism is like it's better when you don't know all these things. And it's funny too because like I think they even say statistically like engineers, accountants, like it's really hard for them to go and start a business because they just know so much. Like the really smart people with high IQs are less likely to start a business because they know all the risks. And it's the paralysis by analysis, but it's just simpler when honestly, if you're a man of faith, that or it's like you don't have to worry because at least where you're going to go and you're going to die. So it's like, what's the big deal? What's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen, right? So when you go in with that blind optimism, it's just like, I got this. I'm going to figure it out. Like, yes, there's going to be challenges along the way, but man, wouldn't this make a great story? Isn't this cool that we're going to like start a legacy? And I think about, man, there's this quote that like always kind of gets me into tears, but Teddy Roosevelt's quote about the man in the arena, right? I'd rather live a life where I've been I'd rather live the life where I was beat down and failed because at the end of the day, at least I was in the ring and I wasn't outside the ring looking at it. And so that's to me also like a life well lived, is being able to leave it all out on the field, look in the mirror each and every night and say, hey, did I do everything I could to maximize my day and make an impact in this world? And so, so just having that optimism, even if you're blind, you're going to learn stuff along the way. You just can't give up. That's the big thing. Like, yeah, you're going to have challenges. Yeah, you're going to get tugged from your friends and family members. Hey, let's go to the bar. Let's do this. Let's do that. You got to be in that again, I'm going to quote a lot from the Hermoses because it's all fresh in my mind, but you got to be in that season of no. You just got to learn to say no. Just put the distractions aside. There's a greater path and a greater plan that's meant for you. And so you just got to put your nose to the grindstone and be surrounded by the right type of people that will encourage you to keep going and on that path. And Snoop Dogg said this, of all people, life is all about closing the gap, right? As you're growing, again, and you got to see both hands here, like as you're growing, you are either going to fall down to the level of your friends and family members, or they're going to have to grow up with you. And if not, like life is all about closing the gap. You're either going to fall back down to their level or they have to catch up with you, or you're just going to have to get a new set of new friends. Right. So, I took a lot away from, again, all people, Snoop Dogg, but he's been there. He's been extremely successful, a lot to learn from him, but yeah, you gotta, again, I go on these tirades and just keep going. So you just tell me to when
Hey
to be
man, no, AJ, I think this is great. I mean, we got quotes all the way from Teddy Roosevelt to Snoop Dogg. I'm going to meet you in the middle and say a quote from Steve Harvey that I love. He says, "Your career is what you're paid for. Your calling is what you're made for." And what you're describing is when people understand and identify their purpose, that's such a greater path that you already know. Like even on those days I'm not motivated, my purpose is going to trump that motivation. Discipline's going to trump that motivation. And for those listening who may be asking, well, hey, I mean, that's great, but like, what if I don't know what my purpose is, or what if I haven't discovered my purpose? I'm going to encourage you to recognize that your purpose likely derives from your passion. So find what you're passionate about, find who or what you're passionate about, and it's very likely that you might find purpose from within there. But biblically speaking, we talked about being people of faith, and something I'm a big believer in is this concept of, the similarity between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet. So why wouldn't we choose faith? Even in the Bible, we know that that God's word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. So to your point, if I knew what the journey would look like in entrepreneurship beforehand, I'd probably be like, you know what, I'm good. That's not for me. But knowing, hey, each and every day, I'm just choosing to take just one step of faith, knowing that he's going to provide and he keeps on providing. So,
I love it. And you got to surrender too. And actually, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. Like, and I don't care what people see from the surface with me. There's a lot of turmoil that goes on behind the scenes, and we're kind of in it right now. There's a lot always going to be challenges. I want to make sure I'm not, like, I always talk about this when I hire someone too. I want to make sure reality matches the brochure. Like, in whatever someone sees as polished right here, there's I heard someone say this too. It's a lot like being a duck. You see a duck on the water, they look calm, serene, just floating along the water, but under the surface, man, their little feet are flapping around, going crazy. So, a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes, but also too, a lot of times what we catch ourselves doing is we're trying to control. And so we have to also just learn to just step back and surrender, and so we also got to know that, like, hey, you have a plan for me. I just and I don't know what's going to happen, right? But I just pray that you're just going to be there along with me, and I know you are going to be you are indwell with me in me, and that you're gonna be with me no matter what. And so that's the thing, having that faith eliminates that fear, because fear is man-made. Fear is something that we make up in this earthly world, and that can be that is a huge obstacle for so many people to want to take that next step and that leap of faith, right? It requires killing off the old you. It requires just killing off that fear. And so when you feel that anxiety, right? Like anxiety, again, I think Hormozi brought this up again. Like anxiety was really kind of defined as there are so many decisions to make and you don't know which one to make. And whereas also on the other side of that, like depression is when you think that there's no hope. Right. Mm-hmm. And so again, all those things are man-made, but man, that depression, that anxiety can and will be alleviated when you're walking alongside him on your faith journey. And so that's that is like, I know that, like, when I pray and I had that conversation, right, it allows you to just have that gratitude and be like, wow, man, this is an incredible life we get to live. And like, again, one of these like Bible quotes that like I always am and just always throwing back up into my mind is like, if you've been blessed with much, much is expected of you. And so to have just this life that we get to get up and serve and contribute in every day, holy crap, like, to have that and to not contribute to, like, again, you can't put a candle and put a bowl over, you got to let that light shine. And we can make such a huge impact on this world. So it just goes such a long way to make sure that, back to the purpose piece too. I'm not going to lie. I was very fortunate to find my passion early in life. I knew as soon as I started tinkering on my own car, I was like, oh, this is it. This is what and I thought I was going to be a mechanical engineer. I actually tried it out for a year. I dropped out. I realized that wasn't for me. I didn't want to have a job behind the desk. I wanted to work with my hands. So I just knew early on, like, what my passion was. And it's true. There's people that struggle to try to find that, but you just gotta keep trying. You gotta keep experimenting in different things, and what you like to identify with and what gets you up every day, and let that be the path, and just try things out. So I will say that is something I had very early on in my life that allowed me to kind of just continue this path. As a visionary too, I'm more of a visionary than an integrator, but I can see, also too, by the way, we created a vision board, my wife and I. And
Okay.
so, that's something that I can, and it's also like, on the background of my phone, so I'm always reminded about like what the lifestyle looks like and also what's going to be in my heart as we move forward in this life. And that helps. That really helps add a lot of clarity, so as far as like where you like what do you want out of life, and then just reverse engineer it. It sounds easy, but it's really hard to create.
Well, the thing is, I appreciate you bringing this up because a lot of goal setting sounds easy. I mean, like goal setting is actually the easy part. Like goal setting itself is the easy part. Achieving those goals requires the time, effort, and energy. Like we have the end in mind, which is the goal that we're striving for. But what are we going to be doing in order to get here? And so I love the fact that you and your wife have a vision board. I think it's very important for clarity and direction. The two things that I share with every one of our clients, like, hey, look, at the end of the day, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So what we get to do for our own clients is we get to create two things so that we can provide two things. We get to create safety and trust so that we can provide clarity and direction. You mentioned earlier, AJ, about how important it is to recognize, like, to whom much is given, much is required. I'm hearing responsibility when you say that. And as a shop owner of 5 different locations, multiple team members across all locations, what level of responsibility do you feel, and how do you manage that? Being a business owner who's quite, let's just put it simply, you play a heavy role in the responsibility of providing for these families. How do you manage that?
Yeah, and I think of those big life moments when they happen with our employees as like, oh, that's the stuff that gets me up. I just had an employee just had a child last week. I'm like, man, like we've created something where someone is now living their best life, right? Or buying a house or getting married or engaged. Like, just to see those life events occur within our business, like those are those moments where I'm like, glad I'm here, glad I'm able to serve, and I'm glad I'm able to kind of grow this. So if you look at the responsibilities, like, yeah, again, back to serving, right? I want this, and I've kind of, I've clarified this vision with our team, but I want this company to be the vehicle for them to live their best life, right? And so, back to that vision board, right? There's in EOS too, they have something called a family plan that you can develop. And when you put that, it's pretty much like a VTO, but for your personal life, the Vision Traction Organizer, as they call it in EOS. It's kind of like a 2-page business plan, but you can fill one out for your personal life, right? And when you put something like that in front of somebody, no one's ever been provoked to even try to attempt to fill one of those out, right? And so it's heavy. It's like, what are your core values? What's your lifetime wish list? Like, what are the things that you want to accomplish, and to start thinking along those lines, because once that's been articulated from every employee inside the organization, and we start sharing that amongst everybody, like that's my North Star is one thing, right? But everyone is going to have their own version of what that North Star is going to look like. Whether it's a house on the water, or I want the 5 kids, or whatever that version looks like for them, that should be the reason why they're getting up every day. And so when that's been articulated, us as in that leadership world, we just want to make sure that we can set them up for that success, right? Is to just kind of sit down with them and reverse engineer what their vision board looks like. Okay, great. You want this? This is how we get there. You want to be a millionaire? It's easy. I can show you how you can become a millionaire. And so let me help you live the best version of the life that you want. And so let's reverse engineer. And no one, I think that there's, again, why do people leave or stay with companies? It's because they feel like that there is some sort of a path forward, right? And so if you can kind of create that and articulate that and help them along on that journey, because look, we're, in the trade that we're in, it's not talked about. It's not done. The things that we talk about, maybe you'll find at a big corporate level, but I think that if we can articulate that from every employee in the company, and then we can be that vehicle. If this company and our ability to serve our community, and yes, we just happen to work on cars, but it's a privilege to do what we do because we keep people moving. We get them to church, we get them to soccer practice. If we can be that vehicle that serves our community, and we can celebrate in the value that we're offering our community and rewarding our people for a job well done so they can live the best version of their life, there's nothing greater that to do, right? And that's like the mission.
That's AJ. That's amazing. First, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's very evident to me that you put people first. You recognize that your people, your team members are your greatest assets. And we know that 70% of people are disengaged at work. They're disengaged at work because they don't feel seen. They don't feel valued. They don't feel heard. And so when you can put connection before content, people before process, people before profit, that goes such a long way. And so I want to commend you for that, because you're right. Especially in this industry, it's often not the focal point of a business. It's often the numbers, it's often the KPIs, and then the people. And if we can focus on people, our people are our greatest assets. And when we get to serve people, and then those people are serving people, serving guests, the rest is, the transaction it's a natural byproduct of exceptional standard setting service. And to your point, we just happen to be using the vessel of automotive repair to achieve that servant leadership. I'll ask you, AJ. So let me ask you this: what advice would you give to anyone listening who is considering opening or starting their own shop, or just their own place of business in general?
Yeah, gosh, and you hit me with that question before we started the show, and it's a great question. Like, I think of this is just from me and my life story, but I think of the attributes that are kind of really required to be able to start this path, and then and also like not give up, right? It does require grit. You have to. This is not easy, and you need to know that. There will be tension. There's going to be those all-nighters. There will be like heartfelt loss. There will be tragedy. There will be failures. There will be there'll be a lot of work, and you're going to lose friends. You're going to potentially lose, relationships with your family members on this path, right? And I mean, shoot, it was just like Jesus's path was the same way, right? I mean, he was ultimately crucified, right? And so, I'm not saying we're going to go to that extent, but it's just, along that journey, you are going to run into these, but also too, you have to go through the crap, as we say, the failures. Because then you also can recognize what a win looks like and when to celebrate those successes. So to have those extreme failures and to triumph and have those amazing wins where you can grow, and also do it with a team where you get to celebrate that as you grow. There's nothing greater as far as like a feeling, is concerned, but also too, like, you just got to have that open mindset to learning, lifelong learning, a curious mindset. You have to always be developing yourself, because again, it does work top down in that sense. If you're not growing, how could you ever hold your people or expect your people to want to grow as well? So everyone sees what you do too. If you are a business owner right now, or even a leader inside of an organization, monkey see, monkey do. They see whether you show up late. They see whether you check out early. They see your behaviors. And they are not going to follow you if you aren't willing to be the one up front at leading and charging your people, and willing to get into the trenches with them. And so, like, we've got a poster in our office at one of the stores where it's the difference between a leader and a boss. And the leader's out front, charging forward with his people following him, right? And then the boss is the one whipping his people to get them to change their behavior. And there's a better way to lead. And if you're out front and leading by example, you have to be that example. And so I don't know if that answers your question. There's a lot in there, but yeah, it's a tough path. It's a tough road.
Yeah, well, no, it answers the question. Early on, I'm thinking, man, like now I'm questioning, do I want to own a business? But I will tell you, we know it's worth it. We know that if you're willing to put in the time, the effort, the energy, the early mornings, the late nights, the blood, sweat, and tears, there's an opportunity to lead a legacy, to ultimately leave a legacy. And that's really what it sounds like you're doing, man. I really want to commend you for the job well done and the job that you're going to continue to do with your people. It's a breath of fresh air to meet with someone, especially in this industry, who is really focused on making their people their priorities and valuing their voices, knowing that every voice is heard, every opinion matters, every idea is at least considered. I think it's so important to put your people first, and it's very evident that you're doing that. So AJ, man, thanks for being on the show. I do have one last question as we begin to wrap up. Dude, you brought a lot of incredible nuggets. I mean, a lot of information we can all take away from this. Let me ask you, greatest advice you've ever received from a coach or a mentor, what would you say to that question?
You know, and this phrase actually came from someone back in my racing days. So it wasn't even related to business, but never give up.
Never give up. Love it.
Never give up.
Okay.
Never give up.
Okay. Very good. Well, AJ Neely, man, thanks again for being on the Limitless Leadership Podcast.
Yep. Thank you, Josh. Pleasure to be here.
Every episode, we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.